Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I'm going to be talking about Dungeons and Dragons and how James T. Kirk has become a problem, is quickly becoming a problem for Dungeons and Dragons directly. All right, so how did this happen, right? Well, let's talk about it. So today, The Hollywood Reporter reported that Chris Pine, who plays James T. Kirk, and also Chris Hemsworth, who plays specifically Captain George Kirk, James T. Kirk's father, right? That the talks between them and between both of them and Paramount to star in Star Trek IV broke down, right? And so those talks broke down. So it looks like Paramount is having a very hard time getting the stars they need for Star Trek IV, right? So, and even the reporting of these talks falling through is going to cause disruption for Paramount, right? Now, what's that got to do with the price of beans in Faerun, right? Well, I'll tell you exactly what it has to do with the price of beans in Faerun. So, the Dungeons and Dragons movie was announced in 2016, I believe, and a new Dungeons and Dragons movie to replace the very problematic movie that we had in 2000. Which really no one liked, at the macro level. And so basically that movie started with Warner Brothers. Well, it recently bounced out of Warner Brothers and landed at Paramount. Now, Paramount has, specifically the rights to make Star Trek movies in the Kelvin timeline, which is named after the USS Kelvin, right? Which is separate and distinct from the Prime timeline, which is what you know traditionally with Star Trek, which would be, those are the movies that had the same characters from TOS and TNG, okay? So Paramount had actually licensed the ability to make these Star Trek movies from CBS, okay? And they were moving along, but they had some serious problems within those. All these movies did fairly well, but not nearly as well as anybody hoped, not CBS or Paramount. And they have a complicated licensing agreement, which allows Paramount to continue to make these movies, right? If Chris Pine doesn't come back, Chris Hemsworth is not that important. He plays James T. Kirk's dad. Actually, it would have been really exciting to see a film with Thor and Steve Trevor, Wonder Woman's, boyfriend in it. Those are the two actors. And I really think it would have been cool to see Star Trek 4. I'm a huge Star Trek fan, by the way. Not a fan of the new Star Trek Discovery, though. That's a whole different story. All right. So basically, things are moving along. And, they wanted to make this Star Trek 4 with Chris Pine and Chris Hemsworth. And the talks have broken down. Now, it's possible Paramount's going to bring tens of millions of extra dollars. And I think that's what it's going to take, right? With Chris Pine and Chris Hemsworth, these guys have a lot of options in the movie industry. And it could take tens of millions to bring them back to the table, right? So, and right now, the Star Trek movies in the Kelvin timeline are really not demanding that, that kind of investment up front, right? Because it's challenging, right? So all of that. So again, how does this really impact Dungeons and Dragons? Well, the Dungeons and Dragons movie is now at Paramount, and this is problematic. I didn't pay too much attention to Paramount previously because it really wasn't a big concern for me. But now it's a big concern for me because I care deeply about Dungeons and Dragons. I want Dungeons and Dragons to spread like wildfire, right? Well, I'm always saying, they can do this in Dungeons and Dragons 6th edition. They can do this in the promotion of the current Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. They can make this change and that change in the game. But the reality is, you can make all the changes in the world to the game, and what's really going to drive we're at about 8.6 million players. We're around we have 8 million Dungeons and Dragons players. That was discovered within 2017, right? I want that number. I really feel that number in America should be 30 to 40 million, triple or quadruple the current amount, right? And in order to get that kind of growth, you need a successful movie. That is what would, and Dungeons and Dragons is a multi-billion-dollar intellectual property, is world-class, and it deserves not a Netflix show, not a streaming service show. It deserves for real deal, blockbuster American film, American movie, right? So I'm now hyper-focused on Paramount, right? So, and when I looked, I went, oh my goodness, like, was not happy with what I saw. So what do you see when you look closely at Paramount? Well, here's what you see. Their primary movie series, their most successful movie series, are Transformers, Mission Impossible, and Star Trek, okay? Now, we just talked about Star Trek. Star Trek is in trouble if you can't get your lead. If you can't just get James T. Kirk to come to Star Trek, what kind of Star Trek are you going to have? That's going to be a problem, right? Mission Impossible. Man, I saw Mission Impossible 6. That movie was off the hook. It was tremendously good. Still a problem. Here's why. I'm an old dude, and Tom Cruise is older than me, right? Like, if you have an action movie with a 50-year-old in it, that is a problem, man. Like, you cannot continue to do that with blockbusters. Now, if Tom Cruise were a kind of cool dude, say, hey, you know what? I'm really getting kind of old. Why don't I just turn this franchise over to someone really spiffy and young? It wouldn't be a problem. But Tom Cruise ain't like that. He's already proved that. Like Jeremy Renner, he would have been a great replacement for him, but like rather than mentoring him, he did not help him in any way, right? And so, there's a point where you got to go, hey, if this is an action movie, maybe we should have somebody less than 50 who's not on their way to 60. Like, that's just not a good foundation for an action film, right? So what's next? Transformers. Oh, man. Those movies make money, but I am a huge Transformer fan, and I highly regret seeing the last Transformers. And there's a very distinct reason for that, and I do not even want to bring it up. I don't think that Michael Bay is a good steward of the actors, and I don't think Michael Bay is a good steward overall of the Transformers series. I just don't. I don't think he is anymore. It's falling apart, and that thing's off the rails in my opinion, right? So I see a lot, and those are the series that are going well at Paramount. Listen to this list of Paramount films, okay? And these are the problematic ones. Baywatch, G.I. Joe, Mother. What were they thinking with that one? Come on. Ghost in the Shell, loved that movie, absolutely loved it, but it was a box office failure, and it was a huge problem. Downsizing, saw that movie. Really fantastic work by Matt Damon. But just silliness on the part of the writing. Like it had concepts in it that were just ludicrous in my opinion. All right. What else you got in there? Cloverfield Paradox. I really liked this movie. I thought it was really solid. Afterwards, it came out. It surprised everybody on Netflix, right? And then like the critics and most people, the critics just tore it apart, and most people were like, and so. A lot of the movies, even that I like, a lot of people they did not capture the zeitgeist, and it was problematic, right? Action Point, they're in business with the guy from Jackass. Like, this is who you're bringing in. Annihilation. I really wanted to see this in movie theaters. I regret not seeing it in movie theaters. I had friends who told me this was really fantastic film, really special and unique, right? But again, just not a box office powerhouse. These movies, great concept, just under-delivered. And then last, let's talk about World War Z, right? Brad Pitt, he's a mega movie star, right? That movie was solid, did a good job. People really liked it. But the reality is it had nothing to do with the book, virtually nothing to do with the book. I read the book, and I don't understand why you buy a book, and then just pull the label off and leave the entire book behind. That didn't make any sense. And then here's another problem, okay? Paramount has done this in the past. When you get a hit on your hands, you have to use the momentum, right? World War Z, momentum was spoiled. People, I think people were excited about seeing World War Z 2. Now people don't even remember World War Z, right? Same thing with Star Trek. After the first Star Trek film, they had momentum, and then rather than moving on it, they sat for 2 or 3, it was like 3 or 4 years before the second Star Trek film came out. I think it was Into Darkness was the second one. And that loss of momentum was a big, big, big deal, right? So, so the reality is what you're really looking at, right, is CBS has, the Kelvin timeline Star Trek films, right? They are a collection. This is the licensing on them, right? You're talking about CBS, who owns Star Trek, Paramount, who's licensing the right to do the Kelvin timeline movies, Star Trek movies, and Bad Robot, which is J.J. Abrams' studio house, right? And the reality is, when they did this, from everything I could find out from the research I did, CBS did okay. Bad Robot made out like bandits. They made tons of money and really progressed their entire studio option, their house through this project. And Paramount just really didn't get a lot from it, right? And CBS didn't get as much as they wanted, right? So not everybody was happy in this conglomeration, and that is a problem. By the way, I want to be fair to Paramount. They have two super hot films in my opinion, which are Quiet Place was fantastic and blew up at the box office. That movie cost $17 million and made over $300 million. And also, this is a weird one, but Daddy's Home 1 and 2, I saw both films. I really enjoyed them. I'm not divorced. Those movies are kind of about divorce. It's really odd. And so, I felt a little weird watching those because that's my worst nightmare. I do everything I can to make sure that, I have a family and I care about them. So it seems weird to laugh about the situations within divorce to me personally, but I have to admit, I really enjoy those movies. Will Ferrell, and Mark Wahlberg, they really did a fantastic job with those films. Also the film Mistletoe, fantastic film. But these are all films that are within the circle for Paramount that did well. But if you look at that other list, their major series have major problems, and they have a long list of very problematic films at the box office. And so, honestly, I love Dungeons & Dragons. I want a good Dungeons & Dragons movie. How are we going to get it out of Paramount? I don't know, right? I don't know. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I'm looking at the situation, and I'm not seeing a lot of hope, right? And they might be able to pull it out. I think, that's, I'm really hoping they can pull it out. But I'm really not hopeful. I really feel like we're on track again to see a not stellar Dungeons & Dragons movie. And that could really be very, very unfortunate for Dungeons & Dragons Dungeon Masters and for players. So I really appreciate you taking the time to listen about what's going on with the Dungeons & Dragons movie and why James T. Kirk has become a source of woe for Bahamut. All right. And please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful day. Take care.